Hi, I'm Jeremy Toeman, and today at Founder at 50, my guest is Barbara Basbanes Richter. Barbara is a ghostwriter, author, and now literary tech founder slash entrepreneur whose career has been shaped by her family's deep love of books, language, and helping others find their voice. After a decade teaching French and Latin, Barbara pivoted into ghostwriting, eventually founding her own company and writing for Grammy winners, Fortune 500 CEOs, and pro athletes, all while raising a family and building the business from the ground up. What stands out in Barbara's story is how she followed her instincts at every turn, from leaving teaching to her ghostwriting business to founding a tech startup. When she saw how many people couldn't afford professional writing help, she built a more accessible path. And now, with Hello Hans, she's working to help kids stay curious and confident in their writing, even as the digital world changes around them. Barbara and I first met during the Element 46 Tech Accelerator, and I'm so glad to have shared that experience with her. Let's get into it. Barbara, how are you today?
Wonderful, Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. To me, we met through the Element 46 Accelerator, and you are the author, the ghostwriter, the storyteller, the person who knows how to get someone to tell their own story. So I'm excited to hear a bit about yours.
Thank you.
What I'd love to do is start with the early days. So if you could, maybe where did you go to college, and what were the first job or two coming out of there?
Coming out of college? Well, I went to Smith College undergrad. It's an all-women's college, and funny enough, I'm going to the 100th year anniversary of the junior year abroad program, which was transformative for me, which was what I always wanted to do when I was in high school, which I didn't think beyond college. Honestly, all I wanted was to live abroad in France for a year, and that was all I wanted. And yay, got it. And so actually, no, their landmark program is the Paris program, and that's been in Paris for 100 years, and with Columbia, and they have this building, and it's beautiful. And I didn't even know that as an undergrad in high school. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do, was to go live in France. I admit, I'm sorry, a dyed-in-the-wool Francophile. That's all I ever wanted to study. I started studying French in kindergarten. I was very fortunate to have that. So I didn't quite know where that would lead, to be honest. You know how I'm amazed at how some kids know exactly what they want to do when they're younger. I just knew that I wanted French in my life, French and books. I also grew up in a house inundated with books. If I had gone into a hard science field, it would have been shocking. My father's actually a 10-time author. He was a book reviewer. He's still writing. He's 82. So we always had books in the house. And he also was afflicted by one of those, it's called the gentlest of maladies. It's bibliomania. It's where you're kind of obsessed with books. So the apple does not fall far from the tree.
Is that a real thing? Is that like kleptomania, but for books?
Yes, absolutely. There are people who will steal books. There's actually my father, his first book called A Gentle Madness, plug for him, which was a National Book Award finalist. In 1995, he actually he followed the trial of a man named Stephen Blumberg, who was this notorious 20th century book thief who stole books from Harvard, from all these institutions, but in a way that they never knew. They didn't know until afterwards that the books had been stolen. And anyway, this guy's a very fascinating character. Not book thieves, book chroniclers in the Basbanes family. So, always with books and French, but like what I was going to do with it, no idea. I just knew I wanted to go to France. And so went to France, came back to Smith. Senior year comes along. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. So I go to grad school, like so many people. I went to Tufts University for their French program. I was fortunate enough. Back then, they actually used to give you scholarships. I don't know if that's the case anymore. So I had a year to figure out my life while studying French and thinking I'm going into a career as an educator.
Okay.
So that program was really focused on getting French undergrad or graduate students at that time prepared for a life of education, either in higher ed or really the private school route. But private schools at the time didn't really pay. And I think really now the payoff with private schools is, you're getting all of these other ancillary benefits for private school.
Sure.
But I had loans. So,
all right. So you've got a master's from Tufts. You've got an undergrad from Smith. You're set up for definitely something around with words, maybe French ones.
I think.
What did you actually do? What was the first thing you went off to do?
As the year was wrapping up, I knew I was going to end up in Virginia because the man I was going to end up marrying was down there. And I said, let's give this a year, see what happens. But I need a job if I'm
Okay.
going down there. So for that year, I figured I'll teach. I got my certificate K through 12 in Virginia, and I taught in the public school system down there. And I thought that was what I would end up doing down there. And I ended up teaching for about a decade in the K through
Okay.
12 system, actually in a county called Fairfax County.
You came out of school and then you ended up teaching into your early 30s. At
Hmm.
any point on that journey, at any point in those times at school, was there like a little thing in the back of your head? I wish I was in France, or I wish I was writing the great French novel, or anything else like back there? Or was it the opposite where you're like, I love this, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life? Or where were you?
I feel like kind of a fish. Does that make sense? Like it was in the moment. I was actually running a program at the time. I was also teaching Latin. I felt like if I had to go back and observe me, I didn't have time to think about the future. Because I was building a program. Basically to keep my job, the directive was you need to make this bigger. You need to have other kids come in, and it's French and Latin competing with Spanish in a place where there's a lot of native Spanish speakers. It's not an easy ask. But I did it. And ultimately when I left, they had to replace me with two people. So that made me feel really
That's great.
good. But so yeah, I
So
wasn't
then
thinking
let's
about
go to
that.
that. What caused you to actually leave? What was the change that happened?
What happened is I had my daughter, and
Pesky kids.
pesky kids, they show up, sometimes uninvited. And I worked for a year while she was a baby, but my husband worked for the military. And so she was going to daycare on an Air Force base. So even though it was only a couple miles away, if anyone is familiar with DMV traffic, it took an hour to get her. And of course, she was always getting up from a nap. And, it's 4 o'clock. And, you think you're winding down the day. Not that I didn't love being with my daughter, but get my point. And it was a lot. And I felt like I was serving two masters. And there would be days where I'd go to school and feel like my students weren't being served, or there'd be days where my daughter was going off to daycare without extra diapers, and something had to give. So I decided this time is finite. I'm going to be with her. And so I left my job, and I went on. It was not an easy decision. My husband was doing law school at night. We didn't have any
Wow.
family in Virginia. So
You guys were
it,
busy.
we were busy. Yeah. So it was me and Abby, and I don't regret those years for a moment. It was wonderful. But eventually, they grow, and I started to get a little antsy, a little bit of like my brain was fatiguing. So I wasn't
Hmm.
using it, use it or lose it. And I thought, what can I do? I want to be with her. Teaching it is flexible in a way. You do get your summers off, but also it's 8 to 3. And
Right.
sometimes it would be harder to find a sub and prepare for a sub than it would be to just go suck it up and go in. So I
Okay.
thought maybe I do kind of know how to write. I've been kind of doing this forever. I've got some good folks at home I can turn to. So let's maybe try this out. So I started with book reviews. That was like the family trade.
So you were
Stay at
splitting
home
your
mom.
time between taking care of your family and doing book reviews.
Hmm.
I think the sort of expectation versus reality arc is always so interesting. So was there again like, oh, I wish I was in France teaching, writing, etc., or were you still in the I didn't have time to think about it, just be the fish?
No, things were starting to open up a little bit. I realized I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed writing book reviews. I thought maybe I had a book in me, and so in addition to writing book reviews, I did take over a syndicate, a book review syndicate. Of course, newspapers were dropping syndicates, and so everything went online. So I turned it into a nonprofit online. So I was doing that, and as I was seeing these children's books coming in, and of course, I'm testing them out on my daughter, who was my very willing guinea pig. Some were great, some weren't. I'm thinking, I could do this. I know this. I can write a cute little kid's book. And that became the new goal. Goal and reality don't ever always match, especially when you're a writer.
So let me check in on this. So if you don't mind, roughly at what age were you when you decided I've got a book in me?
So if this was in 2012, I was 31,
Okay.
I guess. Yeah.
So still, what I would say that still in a lot of ways early stage career, right? Lots and lots of working years ahead.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Was there any thought to where that book might take you?
No, I just thought I could do a really great children's picture book. And having been in and grown up in the publishing kind of book world business, I knew it's not about the money. It's never about the money when it comes to books, especially children's books. I just wanted to do it and see if I could put something out there that somebody else would enjoy and find interesting.
And what happened?
I wrote a cute little picture book. I wrote up a book proposal. I queried some agents and I got crickets. Nothing. It was also not a great economy at the time.
Okay.
So that was tough. And I got a lot of rejections. I got a lot of nothing.
And were you on the side starting to write it? Were you actually building it while?
I wrote it. I still have it. It's here.
So you wrote it completely, but then you were trying to get an actual publisher.
Yep. And so in the publishing world, generally, you can't just send a manuscript to a publishing house. You do need an agent. That's not always the case, depending on the route you take. But in this case, an agent was the way to go. And so I was querying agents. And, at the time, and it's also kind of true today, unless you're a name, like unless you're a celebrity, it was a very hard time, or you were already established, or you had a really special personal angle. It was very hard to get started, and it's still hard for a first-time author. The odds of getting an agent are similar to the odds of getting into Harvard. So not impossible, but it's hard.
My co-founder at Augie, he's actually just published a business book, and I remember him talking about the trials of trying to find an agent and how that whole process worked. And I think you're right. It doesn't sound like it's gotten all that much easier.
No,
despite the internet, right? Despite the democratization of supposedly everything.
Right.
I'm curious, as someone with such a steep background in books and literature and like quality of words, and sitting in the morass of the internet, which both, blessing and curse, that the internet was opening up for people. How was that impacting you, or was it not?
It wasn't, because I knew a lot of what was just floating around on the internet was junk. I mean, I'm coming from a different place. A lot of folks don't know that. To go and Google, find an agent for my book, you're going to get some folks who've written a blog post, and they're going to, you still see it. These are the 5 most likely agents who are going to look at your book. And those poor agents, God help them. They're getting inundated by people who are sending them stuff. Probably. Actually,
based on the internet today, what you'll really get is a $99 class that'll teach you how to find an agent on your own as your side hustle. Smash that like button.
Probably true. Although really all you need is a membership to Publishers Marketplace, where you can actually do the research in the database and see who's representing what. Finally, I did get an agent from a really great publishing house right back and kind of say what I had a sense was happening at that point. At that point, it had been about 6 months of sending it out, nothing. And he said, it's charming, it hits all the notes, but nobody knows who you are. I had no platform, this was kind of the dawn of social media, and I just didn't have that. This was still the time when publishing was still kind of equating followers to book sales, which now we know is not always the case. You have to do a couple more things to convert, right, your followers into buyers. It's true across every industry, but that wasn't so clear then. And so I read that, and the takeaway, I think, for most folks would have been, I'm going to go develop a persona. I'm going to go get on Instagram, and I'm going to start doing all of those things to cultivate my following. And I read that, and I said, wow, okay, so I don't have a following, but maybe somebody who does but can't write well needs me. And so that's how I kind of actually got into ghostwriting, was deciding that I would help folks who had no idea how to write a book, or didn't have the time, or whatever else, but had a platform and needed help. So I put my shingle out, and I haven't looked back.
If you were to go back in time and give yourself that one piece of advice kind of thing, and not like now I'm Jeff Bezos, I've changed the world, but more of just mild course adjustments, right? Would there be a thing like go develop a platform? Would that have been one of yours to younger you, or where else might you have taken that learning backwards?
I think if I could, I'd say, Instagram's going to be huge. Get on it now. I didn't get serious about Instagram until after I launched my ghostwriting company and realized I needed to reach my audience. So I probably would have recommended that, but also knowing what I was doing then and kind of where I was extended, give myself the grace that it would probably not be consistent.
Yeah, I've always wrestled with the invest in those things, because sometimes I used to, I'll give you one. Do you remember Friend Feed?
No.
They ended up getting acquired by Facebook. It was just another one of these social platforms. They were an aggregator of your social platforms. So it was like all of your other feeds in one. But I remember oh, you know what? Maybe this will be one of the big ones. I'll invest in this. I'll get some followers, build a platform. And it, didn't really emerge that way. It's so hard to know which is going to be the bet. But I think you're right. Like you've got to pick something from time to time and say, if this thing blows up, at least I want to be on it.
Yep. And I didn't see that. Honestly, what I thought was, oh, I'm going to be writing because now I do need to support, Abby was going to school. I needed to get back into the workforce. I figured my byline would be enough, not realizing that the shift, because still at that time, what did I value? I think back, I wanted to see my name on paper in a magazine, in the newspaper, and that would shift, on its completely in a year or two. And so I didn't see that coming as quickly as it did.
When was that first time you remember that feeling of I want to see my name on a thing?
I guess it's always kind of been there. It's strange. I always saw, like, with my dad writing a weekly column and his name would be, I would see that. And that seemed really neat. And I liked that. And I also knew that I could write well. So I felt like that was a possibility and that at some point that would happen. Eventually I did start writing for a magazine regularly. I was writing a weekly about the book world, of course. And that was great. And then the magazine also had a monthly publication, and I had to pitch and I had to have a story and all these things. And it was a process, and it was worth it when I would have like the double page, or I would have the story, the lead, and I loved it. And it was heady. And of course, everyone loves it. As you see these folks online who are saying you can get your book published. Of course, we're appealing to our vanity. It doesn't go away. Even if that book is an ebook, people love to see their name. So, I'll cop up to that.
It. Okay. So we're moving into this next phase now. Tell us a little bit about that. What did you end up doing with it? Did you build a whole book of business? Was it as they say, a side hustle? What was this for you? And where did you take it?
I recognized that the byline writing that I was doing, though fun, again, appealing to the vanity side, did not pay great. And by not great, I mean, like, not really. It was like a token, like, thank you for your effort. But it wasn't paying the bills. And ghostwriting had that potential. I queried, there was actually a firm at the time, and I saw that they were looking for ghosts. And I just sent my resume and I got a response immediately from the office, and we talked and it was a good fit. And so this was actually another ghostwriter who was building out their company and needed help. And so I came in and immediately I started work, and I loved it because it was deadline oriented, and I was working with people. What I didn't realize at the time was that I really enjoyed sounding like other people. It was a challenge to me. And also that these folks were coming from all sorts of different backgrounds. And the directive was, whether it's in finance or whether it's in medicine, whatever it is, you need to make them sound like them, but also make sure that they can reach their target audience.
Okay.
And so I loved that. And that was great. I learned a lot from that place.
How did you get to know someone's voice? What was that about?
So actually, at this particular place, they had a process that they liked to use. They wanted everything in a particular standard way. And so that was good for me coming into the business. And I have to say, I don't think, and I say this now when I get resumes from wannabe ghostwriters, it is not an entry-level gig. You cannot do this right out of college. There's no way I could have done this coming out of college. I had to do that other writing first, find myself first, and then be able to say, all right, put the ego aside, you're here in the service of somebody else. Kind of like teaching. That's kind of what I've realized, is it is a form of helping other people develop their voices.
If someone out there is listening and they're like, I want to be a ghostwriter, what would be that most important thing for them to do? You said find your voice, but what does that mean?
What does that mean? That means reading a lot, reading widely. Doesn't matter if it's in English, right? I'm living proof of that. It can be in French, it can be in Spanish, whatever. Read widely, write widely. And I really credit those early writings, those early byline pieces with helping me. And if you do get into ghostwriting, I think the best piece of advice that I have for myself, at least, is pretend that your name is going on it. Because I have seen way too much junk that was written by a ghost, and the ghost doesn't care because the ghost name isn't on it. And
I love that way of thinking. Actually, when I bring on contractors, we brought a contractor to do some design work on something for Augie. And one of my comments to him was, I want you to assume that the thing you're designing is going to be the front thing in your portfolio, right? And by doing that, you sort of get them into this mental state. Like, it's the same as pretending your name is on it, right? Because you level up their stakes. And I think that's so important.
You hope so.
You hope so. How do you give an author the confidence that you can represent their voice?
For a new ghostwriter, that's hard. There's a leap of faith, I guess, to use the cliche, but also I had that portfolio of my own writing across a variety of domains. I had by that point, had I translated my book yet? I don't recall. I did translate a book from French to English. That eventually became part of what I could share with folks. So having that under my own name was helpful. Eventually, when I did leave this other place and branch out on my own, that was very helpful. And then eventually, you just keep doing good work, and people talk. People will say, "Hey, if you want somebody to help you, Barbara can help," as you know. And it becomes just building your network and talking to people and going to the things. And that becomes easier. And that became easier for me as my daughter grew older. So I did expand kind of with her.
Okay, so we have the ghostwriting chapter per se, but now where we started, we met through the Element 46 Startup Accelerator, the Westchester County's Startup Accelerator program. So to me, I met you as an entrepreneur in the publishing, getting a story out world. Take us to when you got inspired to become a startup entrepreneur.
I founded my ghostwriting company. We wrote for Fortune 500 CEOs, Grammy Award winners, pro athletes. So we're working with really cool people. And people would call and I would give them a quote and they couldn't do it. And it wasn't because they didn't have the story. It was because good ghostwriting is expensive. And the time, all of those things, you become kind of, actually, I like to think of ghostwriting as a 9-month marriage. So it does become an investment of time and all of those things. And that made me sad that I was turning away, perhaps for every one client that I would work with, I was probably turning away 10. And I felt like it actually really disappointed me because I knew where they were going. And if you just do a quick Google search, you'll see these companies will publish your book for $500. We'll write your book for, $1,800. I've actually gone to some of these sites and pretended I'm looking for a book. They'll give you a quote of like $5,000, and you say, "Oh, that's too expensive," and then they come down right away to like 800, but you have to pay it all right now. And then guess what you get?
Okay,
you get junk, and it's you're out $800, which is almost worse than not having done anything at all. So I thought there had to be a way to serve these authors who had the stories but limited resources. So what I realized was the answer was in front of me with my ghostwriting. I had to disassemble the ghostwriting process into a series of discrete steps that anyone could follow and end up with a book. And so that's where you and I met after I had spent a year developing and refining a program that eventually became DIY Book.
Now let's go back to actually getting it started. A lot of people see there has to be a way to do this. There's got to be an easier, there's got to be a better. You actually, though, decided to do it. What was pushed you over the edge from there's got to be a way to being the person to make the way?
I could see there really wasn't anything else out there that was doing this. There was maybe one other company was doing something slightly similar, but didn't have the writing background, was maybe coming from a tech background. And that was something I knew forever was I don't have a tech background. That's going to become more and more important. AI is going to be very important. I think perhaps I didn't quite recognize how quickly that would happen. It's funny. I actually did a book on AI a couple of years ago, and I remember thinking this is coming, but I didn't realize quite the freight train that it would be.
We knew it was coming too. We were doing video stuff back when I was at Warner Media that was like, oh wow, yeah. I think the freight train came like dropped out of space or something. I want to take us back to getting started, and at some point you had to recognize, OMG, if I actually go start a startup, not only the tech stuff, but just that's going to be a huge undertaking.
I had a sense, honestly, again, not realizing how quickly it was going to happen. I had a sense that more and more people were going to be turning to do-it-yourself platforms and that I wanted to be there in some form. So, because I had clients who were coming to me, and this has always been the case, they would have drafts and things like that. But now with these tools, these virtual tools, they were coming to me, not necessarily, I'm not saying that it was all good, but they were coming with these things. And I could see that it was going to keep getting better and better. And I wanted to be part of that. But I also knew I couldn't quit my day job because day job pays the bills. So, and that's hard. I mean, I don't think there's any way around it. Like you just don't have time.
Did you have a process or a workflow?
So I had because again, I'm not a technical person. I did have a team that was, once we had the schematics for what we wanted the site to look like, and once we knew how we wanted the flow to be and they were working on it, I could keep doing my ghostwriting work. So that was good. But once we got into the, where I needed to be there day to day, it's hard with ghostwriting because, you have client calls or interviews or whatever. So I can't be like,
Right.
well, from 8 to 11, I'm doing this. And so each day I would look each day beforehand and see where am I going to fit things in, but make sure that if it was ghostwriting, it was ghostwriting. If it was the startup, it was the startup. Didn't always
And
work, but that was the goal.
you said we when it comes to DIY book. So let's actually take a moment. Please, if you would, just define DIY book and what it was maybe when we met, or at least the vision you had at an early stage. We'll talk about where you are today. But what was that initial vision? How would you define it? Maybe your elevator pitch, if you will. And who was the we?
Well, we is me. I mean, when we
We
also,
is you.
I do
Okay.
kind of run everything by my husband to make sure that, because he's my sounding
But do
board.
you? But by the way, I have no objection to that. I'm asking because I like. Does it help you as a framework? Do you think about it like DIY book is we as a thing?
Yeah, I do. Like it's a baby. Gotta take care of it.
That's true. Okay. So we is that. And so what's the elevator pitch?
So DIY Book was the affordable do-it-yourself writing platform to help anybody write their life story or business book. They could use the same storytelling tools and techniques and writing prompts used by professionals on a secure writing platform. When they were done, DIY Book would print and ship their book to their door. All they would have to do is pick cover color. And it was, it was like $89. So compared to the many tens of thousands of dollars for ghostwriting, it's a steal. And one part of the publishing process that people don't think of often when they're self-publishing is the whole formatting piece. Like, you did a children's book, which is gorgeous, but it's not as simple as taking your Word document, downloading it, and then uploading it to Amazon. You do have to format the margins and you have to pick a cover and all of these things. And for most folks, justifying the edges, like forget it. So we did all of that for folks so that when they had their print ready, all they had to do was okay it and then.
And was that a manual thing, or did you build some technology that would do it for people automatically?
We built it. So because I know in my own experience, when I've done self-publishing, it's a pain in the butt. It takes forever. There's a high margin of error, especially if you're not a professional. And it can be expensive if you want to hire somebody on your own. So I wanted to take all of the guesswork out of folks. I was imagining my target audience, my target buyer was somebody who had the story, maybe a grandma or somebody who's busy running a business, and they want to get this book out there. They want it to look good, but they don't have the time or the resources to do it on their own. So that was what I was looking for.
One of the things I noticed about the DIY book is there was an incredible amount of thoughtfulness around your point earlier on, like not having it be junk. I think one of the things that I loved so much about what you were doing is your real desire to make someone like me sound as good, like an author, not just a guy who might know some tech stuff, right? And I always felt your thoughtfulness was so key. Thoughtfulness and taste, for example, are things that don't really tend to scale. It sounds like that's something you were able to work through. I'd love to hear a bit about how did you really get that process something that you were proud of, because I consider you someone with that high taste bar.
Thank you. What I did is I mined myself. I went and I looked at my process for getting somebody's story, not only to get their whatever their goal is across, but also make them sound good and make sure it's an engaging story. And what does that look like? And what do those prompts look like? Like you can go and ask for writing prompts and you'll get all sorts of writing prompts for free. And you can get thousands, millions. The trick is to make it all fit and then also all be interesting, because if you don't, you're just going to have a series of question and answers, and that's just kind of boring, and that's always been true for ghostwriting, is that when you're doing an interview with a client, you're going to get all of that information, but what do you do with it? And that is the art. And that when I framed the prompts, I didn't want these just to be writing prompts. So each week an author would get the email, you get the writing prompts, but it's scaffolded. And I'm giving advice as if I were trying to direct the interview with the client in real time, which is not easy.
No, it's not. And I've seen a lot of your content. It's great. And I think scaffolding is a really powerful actual analogy. I don't know if you use it all the time, but it sounds exactly right, because it sets you up to go do the thing, but you still have to go get up there and repair the wall or put the paint on or whatever comes next. How'd you get to Element 46? How'd you hear about it? Why'd you apply to it?
So Element 46, so I'm in Westchester County, and the site launched, and I realized as I think a lot of us know, getting the word out is kind of the hardest part, getting the word out and then getting people to actually sign up. And at that point, I knew there was going to be a tech component that was going to need to shift. I didn't have AI at the time. I knew I wanted it in some form. And I also knew that what I was able to achieve with my limited budget building this site was insufficient. I knew that, but I had the idea. I needed to know more people. So just like with ghostwriting, my network grew. That was great. I applied the same theory to this, and I started going to tech meetups. There's a couple in Westchester that happen monthly.
Sure.
They're great. And I was at the one in Larchmont, and one of I think it was a co-founder or a founder there who said, who was there? It was Deborah from Element 46. She showed up and she said, well, you have a startup. You should, and it's tech-based, then you would be perfect for this. So thank you, Deborah. And I applied and I got in.
Deborah leads, I think it's economic development for Westchester County, something, I'm going to mangle her title because it's got like 17 words in it. But if you are a Westchesterian and you're in tech and you're in startups, she is an unbelievable resource for it and has such good vibe and energy.
She really does.
So you applied, got in. What was the experience of being in an accelerator like for you as a non-techie?
It was a lot of the emotions all at once. It was interesting because I felt even though I didn't have the tech background, I would learn what I needed to find somebody who did. So that was very helpful. So as you've maybe discerned up to this point, writers were in the background. I didn't have a social media. I didn't have I had the Instagram and all that stuff, but that's not where my focus is. It's behind the page. That's where I'm comfortable. And what I learned from this is that you need to be your biggest advocate, but you also still need to be doing the things that ensure that you can play in this space, I guess, if that makes sense. So I got a better sense of how to be an entrepreneur, but also maybe not lose my shirt, because I didn't want that to happen to me. I feel like you hear sometimes these stories of entrepreneurs who like almost had to, go into sell their house or their firstborn to make it happen. And I didn't want that to be me. It didn't have to be that way. If it failed, I was comfortable with it failing and learning from it. And that was a decision that I made back when I even decided to pursue this, was that if it didn't work, fine. Like I'll continue. I'll find something else. I'll learn from it. So I think for me, that was important. Whether that applies to everybody else, I couldn't say. But I did learn that you're not necessarily going to go to failure, but before you get to that point, you got to learn how to advocate for your business and to separate the business from you. And that was kind of an eye opener for me, was that when you're going and asking for money, or you're asking for a co-founder, you're asking for the business. You're not asking for yourself.
I used to say this more in product work, but I like to think of it as that you have to be sort of thin-skinned and thick-skinned at the same exact time, right?
Oh,
because
that's a good, yeah.
It's not you and it's you.
It's not you, it's you. Because you're the one who's going to make all the change. Yep.
Would you mind sharing what caused you to pivot and what the pivot is?
Of course, I would love to share all about the pivot. So at the end of Element 46, we had Demo Day, which is where we go up. We have our elevator speech. We talk about all the wonderful things we're doing with our startup. And you had your presentation for Augie, which was amazing. I had mine for DIY Book. And afterwards...
Actually, I'm going to pause. I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I just want to share a quick little moment. When we were all getting ready for Demo Day, Barbara was not into the practice for her. You knew you had to do it, but you were not into it. I remember you'd walk down, sort of like march down the aisle to your thing, like very, I'm going to go do this thing, and then you'd show up and you'd like blast through it, and you had all your charm and all the things that make you so wonderful. And then you'd end it and be like, and then you just walk up, and it was like you really had to turn that switch. And it was such a joy to watch because you also got so much better. You were like, I remember, at first you didn't want to, and you showed that you didn't want to.
I did.
By the end, I don't think you wanted to, but you certainly were able to be up on stage and hold it, and it was wonderful to watch. So I just wanted to share that anecdote. Now, I'm sorry. Go back into your pivot story, please.
Well, I will. And thank you to Stacy Mandeville, who worked with me one-on-one to get to that point, because I would have otherwise stayed at step one. Although you were pretty helpful too. You told me a couple of times, like, dude, you're phoning it in. So, which I appreciated.
It was only because I know how good a speaker you are. That's the thing. It's like some people, the most they're going to do is really going to be a tough job up there. I knew you had so much energy to bring to it. So that's why I gave you a little of those pushes.
Much appreciated, because it probably wouldn't be at this point right now. It's amazing how like nailing that and just giving it your best you never know. I just put all that other energy aside. So I met my new co-founder of eventually who would become my co-founder.
At Demo Day?
One of his representatives was at Demo Day, and then we had to sit down afterwards, and there was, I guess, to use the word synergy. Ooh, it's not my favorite word, but it was. And he's a technical co-founder, and he's built and helped advise startups for a while. And he loves the idea of building books and helping people share their stories, but wanted to pivot to children and help children learn how to read and write, but also use AI in a way that's thoughtful and teach them skills that they, assuming the AI overlords don't change everything and we don't need these skills, but using AI in their future lives, whatever that is. And right now that's clear based on like reading levels, especially post-pandemic. Kids' reading levels are tanking. Their ability to write thoughtfully is not so great. And the use of online tools is skyrocketing. So something is not working. His name is Boone Chu with Centaur Labs. And he actually has some after-school programs around the world where they're actually independently already helping kids write and use AI and produce books. And so for me, he said, what do you think of that? I love it. It goes back to what I started with, which was teaching. So now we're moving into this new phase of, I guess, entrepreneurship with Hello Hans.
Wonderful. And let's do the official elevator pitch. What is Hello Hans?
Hello Hans is a playful space where screen time becomes story time, inspiring kids to write, share, and publish with confidence.
Lovely. And when should we expect either a beta or a public reveal? When do we think we'll get to try out and say hello to Hans?
Nice. I'm hoping in the next month or so. We are looking at, they're finishing up with some beta right now, and we have a call very shortly to see where that is. And then I hope go and share with the public and get some feedback on whether it's doing what we want it to do, which is to help young writers discover their voice and actually become published authors.
I love that. Now we're here in 2025, and you brought up AI, and I'm curious, given its potential for so many things, how are you using AI? And is there a favorite tool in your day-to-day workflow that is not ChatGPT that you would like to share with anyone?
I don't like chat. I don't use it. I don't use ChatGPT, but I do have a writing platform called lex.page.
Okay.
And it is also a startup, and it is for writers. And you can create your own prompts in the platform to help you do whatever you want to do. And so what I've done, because I'm here, it's me and my basset hound, I can't really, workshop ideas with her. What I've found very useful in this platform is that I can create a series of prompts around, if I'm working on a particular concept, and I can talk. I hate to use the word talk and like anthropomorphize, but I am. And see if I'm on the right track for a particular thought. And it can be helpful, but again, it's helpful to a point. And I have to, even though I've, written out the prompt to really be super specific, it only goes so far. And sometimes it's completely off. That's okay. And when I realize that, when it happens, it's pretty clear. That still helps me because then I know I'm going to go do the exact opposite. But so that's the platform that I like to use is lex.page. And it also has a function where you can turn off any of the, it's called focus mode. So if you don't want feedback, you just turn it off. And I really like that because then I'm just writing.
Wonderful. Well, if you had to define what does success look like at this stage of your professional career, so forget all the personal stuff, just from a professional standpoint, career-wise, do you have this is what I want out of Hello Hans?
I think success would be that we build this site and then we get some feedback from kids and that we can help turn in some small way the tide of I guess illiteracy or just like lack of interest in reading. I mean, we've certainly picked a hard target demographic, which is like middle school kids. And kids who read through elementary school and then they hit middle school and then it just disappears and it's heartbreaking. And that has ramifications throughout life. And it's not just that they're not reading anymore. So if we can even get some kids who may not realize it, it's like eating SpaghettiOs with veggies built into the noodles. Like if you're getting what you need, but you don't realize it, that's what I would like, is for kids to have fun. Unbeknownst to them, they're becoming better digital stewards and better critical thinkers. Because no matter what happens in the future, you're going to have to be a critical thinker. Like you're going to have to know when the AI tool is just a tool and it's not the definitive source, which we are so prone to do. We seem to just acquiesce completely to these tools for all sorts of reasons, and how to use them correctly and to benefit humanity. So that would be successful. I know that's kind of big, but there you go.
Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing that with me. I think it's a wonderful place to be, and I hope what you do is tremendously successful, especially by that definition. Having watched 3 out of 3 of my kids be avid, active readers and just watch it slowly fade no matter what they were doing in life, I think it's a wonderful cause. Barbara, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. You've had an awesome, awesome run so far. And I can't wait for Hello Hans to launch. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Have a great one.
Thank you. You too.